This week's Breeders' Cup Challenge race is the Grade 1 Ballerina Stakes, a 7-furlong win and you're in the filly and mare sprint division. The Ballerina is part of a strong Saturday card at Saratoga featuring 5 graded stakes, also including the Grade 1 Travers for 3-year-olds and the Grade 1 Test Stakes for 3-year-old fillies. The Ballerina drew a field of 7 with Serengeti Empress on the rail, defending champion Come Dancing on the outside, and in between them, Bellafina, the runner-up in last year's Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint at Santa Anita. Jerry D. Bailey. Let's talk about Serengeti Empress first. I think she's probably likely to be the favorite. She has gone the rail now for the 5th time in her last 9 starts. But we talked about this right before we went on the air. I don't think it really matters to her because of her one-dimensional running style. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. She's all or nothing. She's go to the lead, or she doesn't run any good at all, seemingly. And listen, if she's going to go to the lead, she might as well start from the rail. The bad thing about having the rail, especially going 7/8 or even 3/4, is that if a horse doesn't break well, they run the risk of either having to use all their energy to hold their position so that the other field doesn't collapse in on top of them, or sit in the middle of the pack. But that doesn't matter with Serengeti Empress. She's got to go. So the one is just good. It's just fine with her.
When we last saw Serengeti Empress, she was running in the fleur-de-lis at Churchill Downs. She got the kind of trip that we thought she needed to get. She set the early pace. They let her roll. She spread the field a little bit. And yet when she got to the top of the lane, she came up completely empty against Midnight Bisou, obviously, but still. Yeah. She had very little left in the tank by the time she got to the top of the stretch, going 1 1/8. Hence, Tom Amoss is now shortening her back up to 7 furlongs. Her last time at 7 furlongs was the test at Saratoga. This week, 1 year ago, she ran a hell of a race to finish 2nd behind Kofefi. And that day, she also drew post position number 1.
Yeah, look, so the thing that concerns me about Serengeti Empress is not that she gets beat off, because that happens to her. It's her form is filled with it. She'll run horrible, and then she'll come back and run lights out, at least run a lot better. This is the first time she's coming off 2 back-to-back really poor performances. So that has me a little bit concerned. And look, at Tom Amoss, a lot of times he says, I don't know. She seems like she's training well. I lead her over there, and sometimes I never know until the gates open. She's going to have to run back that race when she was 2nd last year in the test, And listen, this is not the strongest edition of the Ballerina, but she's going to have to come with a much better performance.
I agree with you. And, one of the reasons why, interestingly enough, one of her, I guess, biggest nemesis from a pace perspective is back in this race against her, and that would be Cookie Dough. Yeah. Cookie Dough ran against Serengeti Empress last year in the Acorn when Serengeti Empress again had the rail. And they went out and set a breakneck pace. It might have cost Serengeti Empress the race, maybe not. A horse named Guarana won it very impressively. And then in the Apple Blossom at Oaklawn this year, they went at it again right from the start, set a really quick pace, and that totally cooked both horses, especially Cookie Dough. And now, once again, I guess we can expect a pace battle between Serengeti Empress and Cookie Dough.
I would think so. And look, there's a filly coming from Gulfstream Park, Latruska. She won a couple of Grade 1s going longer in Mexico. She hasn't even run in a Grade 1 in the United States yet, but she is coming off a pretty impressive, at least visually impressive race at Gulfstream Park, going a mile. So 44 and change for a mile half is not going to be the same as sprinting versus these fillies, but she could prompt the pace down the backside as well.
Now, in last year's test stakes, the one in which Kofefi defeated Serengeti Empress, the horse that finished 3rd in there, 9 lengths back, Bellafina, who once again makes a trip east, trying to win outside of California for the very first time in her career. In Southern California, Bellafina has a record of 11 starts, 7 wins, and 4 seconds. Her average margin of defeat in those 4 second-place finishes, only 1.25 lengths. Outside of California, 5 starts, no wins, no seconds, 1/3. Average margin of defeat, 9 lengths outside of California. She has been a completely different filly or mare once they've gotten her off the West Coast and brought her east.
I didn't go through the trouble of adding up all the links like you did. All I know is she's a heartbreaker outside California. There's been occasions where I thought the race set up perfectly for her. She was in good form, and there's no reason at all, at least from the gate to the wire, that she would not run better than she does, or at least as good as she does in California. So listen, I've given up on Bellafina outside California.
I agree. After 5 starts, and including quite a few in which we thought she was set up to run pretty well and didn't, and disappointed, and was not beaten by a narrow margin either. I can't use her in this spot. All right, let's move on to the defending champion. You referenced Come Dancing,
Right.
who was beaten in her last start in the Vagrancy at Belmont Park by a filly named, or a mare named Victim of Love, a filly who is back in here in the Ballerina against her. I didn't think Come Dancing's last start was one of her best. I think off of her best form, which she had last year when she won the Ballerina,
Right.
she could certainly be a player in here. The race might set up for her, but I think she's got to take a step forward from that last defeat in the Vagrancy.
Okay, so I'm looking at this just a little bit different. I think the Vagrancy was pretty good. And the reason I say that is because the first start of the year was an apple blossom for her, going long against some of the best fillies and mares in the country. So she ran a pretty good race. She was in there with Serengeti Empress. She was fourth on the rail down the backside, only a length maybe at the most behind Serengeti Empress. She was in tactical striking position. She maintained that almost to the middle of the stretch, and then she faded, which she figured to. That was her first start of the year. So then she comes back. She goes back to Carlos Martin. D. Wayne Lucas trained her while she was at Oaklawn Park. She comes back and runs a pretty good second in the Vagrancy. Now, what was it? Victim of Love won the race, and she was clearly the best. Come Dancing was clearly second best, but I think she builds off that race. I think she gets better off that. And if you watch her race last year in the Ballerina, she broke last. She was last after 100 yards or so, and then all of a sudden, middle of the backside, she makes this move up to the lead, 3 or 4 wide, head and head, and still goes on and wins. So that was a much better effort even than the paper shows. So I think she's coming. And I think the race kind of sets up for her. She can be close. She can be mid-pack. And as we saw last year in the Ballerina, she came from last that day. Now, granted, it was a 5-horse field, but still, she's versatile. So she doesn't need a particular setup.
Tactically, it should be pretty interesting with Serengeti Empress and Cookie Dough up front, probably Latruska right behind them. But then you've got, Pink Sands in the field will probably be out the back end.
Yes,
and then in between, you've got all the rest of them. You've got Victim of Love. You've got Bellafina, who typically doesn't break very sharply first few strides and then runs up into contention. And Come Dancing has some tactical speed as well. So it's going to be a mix of horses there in the middle.
Yeah, the case you can make for Pink Sands is, look, I don't think she's ever run as fast as she needs to win a race like this, but it's going to be strung out. I don't think, even coming from last, she's going to have to go very wide, maybe too wide the entire trip until she turns for home and maybe angle out then. Because of the speed and the shortness of the field, I think she gets the right setup as far as the pace, and I don't think she's going to be a mile wide. So that is in her favor, but she will have to run a lifetime best, I think.
And that's the way we see it. The 42nd running of Saratoga's Ballerina Stakes at 7 furlongs again is designated as a Breeders' Cup Challenge when and you're in the filly and mare sprint division. The Ballerina will be run as the 7th race on Saturday's 12-race Travers Day card with a scheduled post time of 3:42 p.m. Eastern Time.